When people talk about the greatest losses in human history, the burning of the Library of Alexandria always comes up. Imagine a place that may have held every scroll, every book, every piece of knowledge from across the known world. Stories say that travelers, scholars, and merchants from Greece, Egypt, India, and even further east brought their writings there. The shelves may have contained plays by authors we'll never read, maps of lands that disappeared, records of inventions that could have changed our world centuries earlier. But here's the mystery. We don't actually know what happened to it. The popular story is simple. Julius Caesar attacked Alexandria in 48 BCE, and in the chaos, the library burned to the ground. It's a dramatic image, but the truth isn't that clear. Ancient sources give different versions. Some blame Caesar, others blame later Roman emperors, and some even say it was Christian mobs who destroyed it centuries later because they saw pagan knowledge as dangerous. What's worse, there may not have been just one fire, but many smaller attacks over time. Each one took away a little more until finally nothing was left. Why would this be a cover-up? Because when history is destroyed, it's not just an accident. The people in power at the time may have had good reason to want that knowledge gone. The scrolls might have contained records of ancient science, alternative histories, or philosophies that challenged the authority of both rulers and religions. By erasing them, those in charge controlled not just people's present, but also their memory of the past. Picture yourself standing in front of a massive hall, shelves stacked from floor to ceiling with papyrus scrolls. Thousands of them, neatly rolled, each one containing the thoughts, discoveries, and stories of people long gone. Now imagine flames racing along the shelves, smoke curling upward as ink turns to ash. Outside, the streets are filled with shouting soldiers, and the air is filled with the crackle of burning knowledge. Within hours, centuries of memory vanish forever. The tragedy is not just what was lost, but what it means for us now. What if those scrolls had included the full story of civilizations we barely know, like the Minoans, the Olmecs, or older forgotten peoples? What if they described technologies, medicines, or ideas that would have advanced humanity by centuries? Every time someone mentions the library, it's not just about the past. It's about the haunting question, what if? That's the first great cover-up, not necessarily done by one single villain, but by layers of destruction, negligence, and maybe even intention. The people who destroyed the library didn't just burn paper. They shaped the world we live in today, because they decided which voices would never be heard again. 2. The lost city of Atlantis. Did ancient powers erase it? Few stories spark as much curiosity as Atlantis. Everyone has heard of it, the legendary city said to have been rich, powerful, and far ahead of its time before vanishing beneath the waves. But here's something most people don't realize. The story of Atlantis isn't a modern myth. It comes from one single source, the writings of the Greek philosopher Plato, more than 2,000 years ago. Plato described Atlantis as a mighty civilization that lived thousands of years before his time. According to him, it was a land of great knowledge, powerful fleets, and advanced technology. He even hinted that they had systems of canals, irrigation, and architecture that rivaled anything in Greece. But then, suddenly, Atlantis was destroyed in a single day and night of disaster, swallowed by the sea. Now, here's where the cover-up comes in. Some scholars argue that Atlantis was just an allegory, a story Plato invented to make a point about human pride. But others whisper that there may have been a real civilization behind the tale, one that disappeared so completely that its memory had to be buried. Think about it. If such a place really existed, its knowledge and power might have rivaled or even threatened the societies that came later. So what better way to keep control than to erase it? Imagine if Atlantis was real, a sprawling island empire with towers gleaming in the sun, ships sailing across the oceans, and people practicing sciences we barely understand today. Imagine stone temples lined with glowing torches, massive statues watching over harbors, and waterways cutting through the heart of a city alive with trade and voices. Then picture it being wiped away, waves crashing over the walls, lightning splitting the sky, and the sea swallowing the streets whole. Within hours, nothing is left but silence. Here's the chilling thought. If Plato had never written his dialogues, we might never have even heard of Atlantis. It could have been one of countless civilizations erased completely from memory, its knowledge lost like smoke, and even with Plato's account, we still have no proof. No ruins, no records, no artifacts, at least not ones that have survived. What we're left with is a riddle. Was Atlantis a warning story, or was it history's greatest erased truth? Some modern researchers point to ruins in the Mediterranean, others to ancient maps showing lands that shouldn't exist, and some even to South America. Wherever it was or wasn't, the silence in the records is deafening. Whole empires like Egypt, Greece, and Rome left endless writings. But about Atlantis? Nothing. If it did exist, the people who came after made sure to cover its tracks. That's what makes Atlantis one of the biggest mysteries, not just because of what it might have been, but because of how quickly it disappeared from history. Was it erased by time? Or was it erased by those who wanted to make sure no rival civilization could ever be remembered? 3. The disappearance of the Indus Valley script. When we think of ancient civilizations, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece usually come first. But there was another, just as powerful, that stretched across what is now Pakistan and northwest India, the Indus Valley civilization. At its height, around 2500 BCE, it was home to hundreds of thousands of people, thriving cities, advanced drainage systems, and trade networks that reached far beyond its borders. And yet, for some reason, it's a civilization most people barely hear about. Why? Because its story was nearly erased. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley left behind no grand pyramids or giant statues. Instead, it left something even more mysterious: thousands of small seals, carved with animals and strange symbols. These markings are what historians call the Indus script. But here's the catch: no one has ever been able to read it. Imagine an entire civilization speaking, trading, ruling, and worshipping, but all the words they wrote down remain locked away from us. Over 4,000 symbols have been found carved into stone and clay, but without a Rosetta Stone to translate them, their meaning is a closed door. Was it a full language? Was it a form of trade code? Or maybe something in between? We don't know. And that uncertainty has left the Indus Valley civilization in a strange place, important enough to be remembered by ruins, but silent when it comes to its own voice. Now here's where the idea of a cover-up enters the story. Some argue that the Indus script might hold truths that were inconvenient for later powers. After all, the people of the Indus had no kings as far as we can tell, no giant palaces, no monuments to rulers. Their cities seemed organized around equality, with straight streets, plumbing in ordinary homes, and no obvious signs of war. What if their writings revealed a model of society that was completely different from the monarchies and empires that came later? If so, it's not hard to imagine why future rulers would want that story erased. Picture the city of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the great centers of the Indus Valley. Streets laid out in perfect grids, homes with private wells and bathrooms, marketplaces alive with trade. People carving seals with intricate symbols of bulls, elephants, and gods we don't know, and then silence. By around 1900 BCE, the civilization collapsed. Some say it was climate change, some say shifting rivers, others say invaders. Whatever the reason, the script was abandoned. Over centuries, the knowledge of how to read it slipped away, until no one alive remembered what it meant. Today, archaeologists dig up the remnants of this forgotten civilization, staring at those same strange symbols. We have the ruins, we have the artifacts, but we don't have the words. And without the words, the Indus Valley remains a mystery, a blank chapter in human history. The cover-up here isn't just time's erosion. It's the fact that later civilizations ignored the Indus story, leaving it out of their records, giving it no space in their official histories. By forgetting, or by choosing not to preserve the knowledge, they erased an entire way of life that may have been more advanced and more equal than their own. 4. The hidden tomb of China's first emperor. If you've ever seen pictures of the famous terracotta army, you already know part of this story. Thousands of life-size clay soldiers, each one unique, stand in silent rows beneath the ground near Xi'an, China. They were discovered in 1974 by farmers digging a well, and since then, the site has become one of the most incredible archaeological finds in history. But what most people don't realize is this: the soldiers are only the beginning. The terracotta army guards the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor. He was the man who unified China in 221 BCE, building roads, standardizing currency, and even beginning the Great Wall. He was also obsessed with immortality. Historical records say he searched for the elixir of life and surrounded himself with alchemists. When he died, he wanted his resting place to be nothing short of a palace for eternity. And that's exactly what his tomb is said to be, a vast underground complex, larger than any pyramid, filled with treasures and wonders. But here's the twist: the central tomb of Qin Shi Huang has never been opened, not once. Archaeologists know where it is, a huge mound still untouched near the terracotta pits. Ancient writings describe what's inside: palaces with ceilings painted to look like the night sky, rivers of mercury flowing to represent seas and oceans, traps designed to kill intruders, and treasures fit for an emperor who believed he was a god. Why hasn't it been opened? 2 reasons. First, the Chinese government has banned excavation of the main tomb. Officially, it's to preserve the site until technology improves enough to avoid damaging it. But the second reason is even stranger. Tests around the tomb have shown unusually high levels of mercury in the soil. That seems to confirm the ancient writings that rivers of liquid mercury were placed inside. It would make the tomb not only deadly to explore, but also unlike anything else in archaeology. Now, here's where the idea of a cover-up enters. Some whisper that the government doesn't want the tomb opened because it could reveal things that change history. What if records inside describe events that don't match the official timeline of China's past? What if treasures or technologies inside suggest a level of advancement we don't expect from that period? Or what if the emperor's body itself was preserved in ways that raise more questions than answers? Imagine standing in front of that massive burial mound. Beneath your feet lies an entire underground kingdom, sealed for over 2,000 years. Soldiers of clay guard the entrance, and somewhere beyond them lies a chamber where rivers of mercury still flow in the dark. The air is heavy with secrets no one has breathed in millennia. And yet, the world's greatest archaeologists can only stand outside and wonder. This isn't just about patience or preservation. By keeping the tomb sealed, the truth remains hidden. Maybe it's out of fear of what we'll find. Maybe it's about control. Whatever the reason, one of the greatest treasures in human history sits silently underground, waiting. It could rewrite what we know about ancient China, or it could raise even deeper mysteries. But until it's opened, if it ever is, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang will remain one of history's most carefully guarded secrets. 5. The Erased Pharaoh, Akhenaten's Forbidden Religion. In the long line of Egyptian pharaohs, one ruler stands out not because of what he built, but because of what others tried so hard to erase. His name was Akhenaten, and he ruled Egypt around 1350 BCE. If you look at most pharaohs, you'll see grand temples to gods like Amun, Ra, Osiris, and Isis. But Akhenaten did something no other pharaoh dared. He tried to erase all of Egypt's gods and replace them with just one, the Aten, a solar disk, a single god of light. At first, it might not sound so strange. After all, monotheism, belief in one god, is common today. But for the Egyptians, who had worshipped dozens of gods for thousands of years, this was shocking, even dangerous. Akhenaten moved the capital to a brand new city, Amarna, and filled it with temples dedicated only to Aten. He banned the old priesthoods, shut down temples of other gods, and ordered that his people worship only the Sunday. But when Akhenaten died, everything changed. His son, Tutankhamun, yes, the famous boy king, reversed it all. The old gods were restored, the city of Amarna was abandoned, and Akhenaten's name was chiseled out of monuments. Statues of him were smashed. In official lists of pharaohs, he was often left out completely, as though he had never existed. Why? Because for the powerful priests of Egypt, Akhenaten was a threat. Their authority came from the old gods. By replacing them with a single god, Akhenaten stripped them of their power. So, after his death, they struck back. His radical religious experiment became something to bury, literally and figuratively. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Akhenaten's appearance in art looks very different from other pharaohs. Instead of the broad shoulders and perfect features usually shown, he's often depicted with a long face, a thin body, wide hips, and a strangely elongated skull. Some have speculated about illness, others about artistic style, and a few fringe theories even whisper about alien connections. Whatever the truth, Akhenaten looked, or at least was shown to look, unlike any other king of Egypt. Imagine walking through the ruins of Amarna today. Crumbled walls under the desert sun, faint carvings of a sun disk shining its rays on the royal family. Statues half buried in the sand, their faces hacked away, their names scratched out. You can almost feel the silence, as if the city itself was cursed for remembering the pharaoh no one wanted to remember. This is one of history's most direct cover-ups. We can see it in stone, names carved out, images destroyed, whole chapters of history deliberately rewritten. For centuries, Akhenaten was forgotten, until archaeologists pieced together fragments of his story. And even now, the full truth of why he turned Egypt upside down is still debated. Was he a visionary ahead of his time, bringing in the idea of one god centuries before others? Or was he a tyrant who destabilized his kingdom and had to be erased to keep Egypt whole? Whatever the answer, Akhenaten's story reminds us how fragile history really is. A ruler can rise, build cities, change religions, and then be almost completely deleted from memory. His reign is a scar in Egyptian history, one that the priests and kings after him tried to cover up so completely they nearly succeeded. 6. The vanishing of the Minoans. Long before Athens and Sparta rose to power, another great civilization thrived on the island of Crete. The Minoans, named after the legendary king Minos, were masters of the sea. Around 2000 BCE, their ships dominated the Mediterranean, carrying goods, art, and culture between Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Europe. Their palaces, like the one at Knossos, were filled with bright frescoes, advanced plumbing systems, and architecture that seemed centuries ahead of its time. For a while, the Minoans were the beating heart of the ancient world. And then, they disappeared. The question of why is one of history's great mysteries. Some point to a massive volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1600 BCE. That eruption was one of the largest in human history, sending ash clouds into the sky, causing tsunamis, and devastating trade routes. Others argue the Minoans may have been conquered later by the Mycenaeans, their rivals from mainland Greece, and still others suggest a combination of natural disaster, economic collapse, and invasion. But here's the strange part. For centuries after their fall, the Minoans were nearly forgotten. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, which left endless inscriptions and monuments, the Minoans left behind a script called Linear A that has never been deciphered. We can see their writing on clay tablets, but we can't read it. Their voices, their records, their stories, all silent. This silence is where the idea of a cover-up creeps in. Later Greek writers, like those who told the myths of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth, may have deliberately twisted the memory of the Minoans. Instead of being remembered as traders, artists, and builders, they became the villains of legend, a people with a monstrous half-man, half-bull trapped in their palace. Was this just myth-making, or was it a way to bury the memory of a powerful civilization that had once overshadowed Greece? Imagine standing in the ruins of Knossos today. Bright red columns rise among crumbling stone walls, and faint frescoes still show scenes of people leaping over bulls, dancing, and celebrating life. You walk through hallways that twist and turn, so complex that they may have inspired the myth of the labyrinth itself. And yet, no voices explain what happened here. The people are gone, their script unreadable, their memory wrapped in myths instead of facts. The Minoans weren't just a small island culture. They influenced everything around them. Their art shows, connections to Egypt, their trade reached as far as Spain, and their myths echoed into Greek culture. But because their story was never written down in a language we can read, later civilizations had the power to reshape their memory. What if the Greeks deliberately painted them as strange or dangerous to justify their disappearance? What if what we think we know about them is only a shadow of the truth? The vanishing of the Minoans is more than a collapse. It's a story buried under layers of myth, silence, and forgotten writing. A civilization that lit up the Bronze Age, and then, almost overnight, faded into legend. and because others wrote their story for them, what survives may be less history and more cover-up. 7. The Forgotten Hittite Empire. If you opened a history book 200 years ago, you'd find plenty about the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans. But the Hittites? You wouldn't see their name at all. That's because until the late 19th century, the Hittites were basically erased from history. For centuries, their empire was nothing more than a faint echo in the Bible, and a few scattered inscriptions that scholars didn't understand. And yet, during the 2nd millennium BCE, the Hittites were one of the great powers of the ancient world. Their empire stretched across modern-day Turkey, Syria, and beyond. They fought wars against Egypt, signed one of the first known peace treaties in history, and developed laws and administration that rivaled their neighbors. But by 1200 BCE, the Hittite Empire collapsed during the chaos of the Late Bronze Age, and after that, they seemed to vanish. For nearly 3,000 years, the world forgot them. No one told their story. No one passed down their memory. The Egyptians and Mesopotamians left countless records, but the Hittites' writings carved in cuneiform on clay tablets were buried and lost. It wasn't until archaeologists uncovered the ruins of Hattusa, their capital, in the early 1900s, that the pieces began to come together. Thousands of tablets were found, suddenly bringing the forgotten empire back into focus. But here's the question: how does a whole empire get erased? Some scholars think later civilizations deliberately ignored them. The Assyrians, who rose after the Hittites, had no reason to glorify their old rivals. They wrote their own history, putting themselves in the spotlight and leaving the Hittites in the shadows. Over time, the silence grew so complete that even educated people doubted the Hittites had ever existed. Picture the ruins of Hattusa today. High stone walls stretch across hillsides. Carvings of lions, gods, and kings still stand guard at ancient gates. But for centuries, no one knew what these ruins were. Villagers lived among them, unaware they were walking over the capital of a forgotten superpower. Imagine how many stories, victories, and losses lay buried beneath their feet, erased simply because no one wanted to remember them. The rediscovery of the Hittites is one of archaeology's great surprises. Suddenly, history had to make room for a whole empire that had been erased. The Egyptians, once thought unmatched in the region, now had a rival. The biblical references to the land of the Hittites suddenly made sense. It was as if a hidden chapter had been slipped back into the book of history. But the cover-up remains in the silence that lasted for centuries. Whether by accident or by design, the Hittites were erased so thoroughly that they became ghosts. Only the dirt of Anatolia kept their memory safe, waiting for the day when archaeologists would dig it up. And even now, their full story is incomplete. Thousands of tablets still sit untranslated, holding secrets that may rewrite more of what we know. The Hittites remind us that history is fragile. An empire can dominate its world, rule for centuries, and still be erased almost completely, leaving the future to wonder if they were ever real at all. 8. The lost Mayan knowledge. When most people think of the Maya, they picture towering step pyramids, jungle-covered ruins, and mysterious calendars. But what's less known is that much of what the Maya actually wrote, their science, their stories, their history, is gone, not because of time, but because it was deliberately destroyed. The Maya were masters of writing. They developed a complex system of hieroglyphs, carved on stone monuments, and written in books made of bark paper called codices. These codices contained everything from astronomy and mathematics to medicine and prophecy. They tracked the movements of Venus and Mars with precision that rivaled European astronomers centuries later. They had records of kings, wars, and rituals, as well as medical knowledge passed down through generations. And then, in the 16th century, Spanish conquistadors arrived. To the Europeans, the codices weren't knowledge. They were heresy. In 1562, Bishop Diego de Landa ordered the burning of Mayan books in the Yucatan. He later wrote, "We found a large number of books in these characters, and as they contained nothing in which were not to be seen as superstitions and falsehoods of the devil, we burned them all." Almost the entire written record of the Maya went up in flames. Today, only 4 Mayan codices are known to exist. Just 4. Imagine if someone burned almost every book in your country, leaving only a handful behind. That's what happened to the Maya. And with that loss, their knowledge of astronomy, medicine, history, and religion was erased. What survives are only the fragments carved in stone, and what archaeologists can piece together. But here's where the cover-up grows even deeper. Some of the surviving knowledge suggests that the Maya may have understood cycles of time in ways we still struggle to explain. Their famous long-count calendar tracked spans of thousands of years. Their astronomical tables predicted eclipses with startling accuracy. Some researchers believe their knowledge of the stars was inherited from even older civilizations, now lost to history. If that's true, the burning of their codices didn't just erase Mayan history, it may have erased memory reaching back even further. Picture a Mayan city before the conquest. Wide plazas filled with people, pyramids rising above the jungle, scribes painting colorful codices by hand. Now imagine soldiers bursting into a temple, dragging those books into the square, and setting them on fire. The smoke rises, carrying centuries of memory into the sky. The people watch in silence as their history disappears. Within hours, their voices are gone. The tragedy is not just the destruction, but the arrogance behind it. To the Spanish, the Mayan books were superstition, but to the Maya, they were their very identity, their link to the cosmos and their ancestors. By burning them, the conquerors didn't just erase knowledge, they erased part of a people's soul. And so today, we're left with ruins that whisper of greatness, carvings that hint at lost wisdom, and 4 surviving codices that feel like crumbs of a feast. The cover-up is plain. One of the greatest knowledge systems in the ancient world was deliberately wiped out, leaving us with shadows instead of the full truth. 9. The missing records of the Olmecs. Long before the rise of the Maya and the Aztecs, another civilization thrived in Mesoamerica, the Olmec. They are often called the mother culture of the region because so many traditions, symbols, and ideas found later among the Maya and Aztecs first appeared with them. The Olmecs built great ceremonial centers, carved massive stone heads that still baffle us today, and developed complex art and trade networks. Their civilization flourished from about 1200 BCE to 400 BCE. But here's the strange thing. For such an influential culture, they left behind almost no written records. We know the Olmecs existed because of their artifacts. Those colossal heads, each weighing many tons, show faces with distinct features, some stern, some calm, some almost lifelike. We see their influence in jade carvings, pottery, and religious symbols, but when it comes to their own words, their own voice, we find almost nothing. No codices, no long inscriptions, just a handful of mysterious glyphs carved on stone, still undeciphered. This silence raises a haunting question. Were their records destroyed, or were they deliberately erased by the civilizations that came after? The Maya and Aztecs both borrowed heavily from Olmec culture, the ball game, religious rituals, even the calendar, but in their histories, the Olmecs are barely mentioned. It's as if the Maya and Aztecs inherited their culture but wanted to take the credit for themselves. Imagine walking through the jungle and stumbling upon one of those colossal heads. It stares back at you, its lips pressed together, its eyes solemn. You know this face represents someone important, maybe a ruler or a warrior, but he says nothing. Around him, broken stones hint at once great cities, now swallowed by trees. The silence of the Olmecs is louder than words. Some researchers argue that the Olmecs may have kept records on perishable materials like wood or cloth, which simply didn't survive the centuries in the humid climate. But others suspect something darker, that later peoples may have destroyed Olmec records to erase their memory. If true, this wouldn't be the first time in history that one culture erased another to claim the spotlight. The cover-up is in the absence. We see the fingerprints of the Olmecs everywhere, but we can't hear their story in their own words. It's like seeing a painting without the colors, or hearing music without the melody. Their greatness is obvious, but the details are gone. And so the Olmecs remain one of history's strangest mysteries. They built, they inspired, they left monuments that still stand, but their voice was silenced. Was it time that took it from them? Or was it the hand of those who came after, rewriting history in their favor? We may never know. 10. The erased Druids of Europe. When people picture ancient Europe, they often imagine Roman legions marching across the continent, building roads, aqueducts, and cities. But before the Romans came, Celtic tribes dominated much of Europe, and at the heart of their culture were the Druids. These mysterious figures served as priests, judges, philosophers, and keepers of knowledge. They guided rituals, memorized laws, and preserved oral history. To their people, they were the bridge between the human world and the divine. And yet, today, we know almost nothing about them. Why? Because almost everything written about the Druids comes not from themselves, but from their enemies, the Romans. The Druids never wrote down their knowledge. They believed wisdom was too sacred to be fixed on paper. Instead, they trained apprentices for decades, passing everything by memory. This kept their traditions alive for centuries, until Rome decided they were too dangerous. When Julius Caesar invaded Gaul in the 1st century BCE, he described the Druids in his writings. But remember, Caesar was both a general and a politician. To him, the Druids were not just priests, but rivals. He portrayed them as strange, even barbaric, emphasizing stories of human sacrifice. Were these accounts true, or were they propaganda designed to justify Rome's conquest? We can't be sure. What we do know is that the Romans systematically destroyed the Druids. They banned their rituals, executed their leaders, and wiped out their sacred groves. One of the most infamous events was the attack on the island of Anglesey in 60 CE, where Roman legions massacred Druids and destroyed their holy sites. After that, their presence in history fades. Now think about what was lost. The Druids were said to know astronomy, medicine, law, and philosophy. They acted as judges and advisors, holding enormous influence among the Celtic tribes. Some accounts suggest they believed in the immortality of the soul, a concept far ahead of their time. But because they left no writings, all of this knowledge disappeared with them. What survives are fragments, filtered through the lens of their enemies. Picture a circle of Druids beneath ancient oak trees, chanting as the stars shine above. Fires crackle, smoke rises, and their voices carry through the night. Around them, their followers listen, learning lessons about justice, healing, and the mysteries of life. Now imagine that circle broken, the trees cut down, the voices silenced forever. That's what the Romans did. They didn't just conquer land, they conquered memory. The cover-up here is clear. The Druids were deliberately erased. Rome wanted control, and the Druids held too much power among the Celtic people. By painting them as dangerous and then wiping them out, Rome ensured their own dominance. What remains of the Druids is a shadow, a whisper of a people whose knowledge might have rivaled even the philosophers of Greece. And so, when we think of ancient Europe, the story we tell is Rome's story. The Druids, once central to their world, were erased so completely that their wisdom became legend. Another reminder that history is not just about what's remembered, but about what's deliberately forgotten.